review of the material for the first half of the course for the exam on Wednesday. And any questions are welcome. Comments, suggestions, discussion, what's wrong with the course? But most of all, ideas, or whatever. Who has thoughts or suggestions or questions? Yes. Yeah, remind us let's get to know, we're getting to know you a little more. Tell us your name again.
Hi, I'm Lucas.
Lucas, okay.
So I have a question about the midterm. So will it, what is your expectation for our short answer and our essay? Do you expect us to go extremely in depth? Because
you write as much as you can in the time available. Put everything you can say in that. It's a short amount of time. It's a little under 2 hours, so it's class time. I'd say the more you tell us, the better.
Do you want direct quotes, or do you want it just paraphrasing?
Yeah.
Do you want?
You don't need to have a pasted quote with quotations from John Smith, whatever. But that is, don't waste your time looking up that. But you can have the general idea and the name of the person. That our wording may not be sharp. That is, you don't need to have the exact type of. Just say anything on the reading list is enough to say Smith. So Adam Smith said. Okay. But there may be a key word or two. What's the key word from Adam Smith? We talked about?
Extent of the market.
Here we go. So write as many lines as you can on extent of the market. And to divide up the time. So what is it? 40% of the time is the IDs, 60% is the essays. You spend 60% of your time on the essays, and try to have a couple of big ideas. One big idea is enough, and then fill in specifics. That is, let me put more positively. There are 1,000 different ways that you can write an A essay. This is not a, we're not asking tricky questions where there's a right or a wrong answer. These are all general kinds of things that you can give us something which you know and which you've heard in the course, you've read about it, you thought about it, you talked about it with your friends, whatever, as we've tried to illustrate here. But that is, you can do it. You can do a terrific job in many different ways, all of which are fine. Fair enough. Hand up, yes.
Yeah.
Tell us your name.
Hi, I'm Sneha. I had a
So
question.
Stella?
Sneha.
S-N-E-H.
H-A.
Okay,
Yeah.
Sneha. What's your last name? I think.
Kumar.
Okay, yeah, Sneha Kumar, right?
Just in terms of the midterm format, you said it was, the syllabus says that it's administered via Canvas for during class
Okay,
time.
a little slower. Fill the what, the sense?
Canvas said that it was, or the syllabus said that it would be administered via Canvas.
Yes.
So should we be coming in person into this classroom for the test?
No. Okay. You can write the exam as it says in the syllabus anywhere you want. In the library, in your home, with your parents, with your priest, whatever, in your bar, ask a bartender, whatever you want. And when we say Canvas, that is either, I think you will send, that Canvas will be used to mail it to you and your email. So if your email in Canvas is correct and it's your uchicago.edu, so don't try to put a Gmail in, because Canvas won't accept it, I think. That's the reason Canvas is used that way. Is that clear? Okay. You use your University of Chicago email and everything should work fine. And then at the end it says, send it back to where? Me and the TA, and our emails are there, and they're on his email, I think, and he sent out something, I think, today, maybe said that. But if he hasn't today, he will probably tomorrow. And it says the same thing at the top of the syllabus. So that is, you can use all your books, any notes, anything on your computer, but you can't paste, you can't copy and paste. The exam has to be your words during that, your own words written in that exam period. Otherwise, that's called plagiarism. Okay, that's the university's definition. Is that specifics? Any other specifics or big ideas, little ideas? Silence. What are some distinctive things in the course that you may have learned that inform some of the things in the specific readings? What's different here from Economics 101 or Political Science 253 or IR? Well, let's take a major too. Someone who's an economics major. Nobody here? Okay. What are you? Who's chosen a major? Maybe if you're, yeah. What's your major?
Public policy.
Okay, public policy. What's different from what you've taken in other public policy courses here? And what is? How can we complement and we're not refuting anybody. That is, there are lots of right things that are right that you'll learn on this campus. But there are different ways, and so as I say, almost nothing on the reading list is wrong. The question is where and why do they hold? So it may only work in Oklahoma, but not in Tennessee. If so, what's the difference? Why is Oklahoma different from Tennessee, if that's the question? So then the context becomes a critical part of the course. So how have you heard that anywhere in a public policy course?
Not exactly. I feel like in my other public policy courses, or public policy courses specifically, I don't get the level of like multi-causality that we're exploring in this class. And so there's more of a focus on like pinpointing one specific system or trend in one specific place.
Can we have your little face with the mask up, if that's all right?
Sure.
Because there are lots of public policy people who won't be here today.
And then in this class, it seems that we look at systems and trends in various places and how they interact and how sort of different causes.
Exactly. I'll just mention in terms of public policy, if you went to the Kennedy School in public policy, you get one kind of training which is very much hands-on. They're mayors, they're former mayors who are teaching there. If you go to Rand, you learn fancy statistics, modeling, very, very mathematical and computational. If you went to Berkeley, the School of Public Policy was created by Aaron Wildavsky, and what would he stress? Anybody know? Maybe I'm trying to remember now. Maybe it's later on in the course. Okay, Wildavsky is the guy I mentioned. I think he changed his theory from incremental budgeting to after Prop 13 passed in California. That is, the citizens of California, 1978, said, cut the taxes by half. And Wildavsky's whole theory was wrong. He said, my God, my theory's wrong. You can't do this. You're supposed to just have little changes. Cutting half the taxes, I mean, that destroys all of how budgeting is people think is done. So if you have, this is the way you do budgeting, you add 3% and it goes to police and fire and so forth. And then how do we deal with that 3%? Okay, that's a completely different model of how public policy consists of than if you have half the voters say, you police are fascists, we're gonna cut you off. And that's what's happened more recently. The last 5-10 years, we've had lots of debates just like that. So and so for public policy, Some public, so I'm not saying that any one of these is right or wrong. Each of these can be useful to have in your head. If you learn statistically, you see how mayors talk in their own terms, and then you see something more about the system and how it works. So Wildavsky talked about, and he then looked for ways of labeling things, and he finally tended to use more often culture, culture. So we have a section on political culture, and we have a section on, that we brought that in other courses, in other sections through the course already, and we'll get more after the midterm. Okay, but you get anybody can get the idea easily, but the question is, how much do you focus narrowly or bigger, or do you deal with the methods or with the data or something else? Okay. So, good question. Who else? Remind us of once you, if you could pull down your mask and tell us your name a little bit, to remind us of some of your interests.
Yeah, I'm Haley. I'm majoring.
What's your last name?
Thomas.
Haley Thomas. Okay.
I'm majoring in human rights and law letters and society. I think this class is really interesting in conjunction with human rights, because within a lot of those classes you focus on the results of like political thought or like developments on individual groups and nations through like individual rights, rather than like the processes that cause them. So here it's interesting looking on both the local and global level of developments, and then like connecting to the human rights, like the aftermath on individual levels.
And as you point out, the levels can have in the same country, in different cities, very different causal dynamics, as we're seeing these weeks with Trump versus Biden. We've got drastic battles to try. We're going to change the whole world, and they're doing it. But where and why and how much is rhetoric and how much will really change is difficult. And the point is, the voters are roughly half and half. So whoever was president still have all kinds of things going on. And so we're going to have a lot of mayors, a lot of governors, a lot of others, judges. We're all fighting and the same thing occurred with perhaps less extreme versions, we'll see, when Trump was president. So that is when he was president. I taught this course then, and other courses, and we would regularly contrast what's the perspective of Trump, of Hillary Clinton, of Black Lives Matter, or another black activist group in the U.S., and then one of the Middle Eastern terrorist groups, and each of them had different views of the world. Are they right or wrong? Each of them have their own rationale, and they each think they're very, very right. So we don't want to ignore the culture which is there. We want to treat it as data, and then analyze it. And so we include readings that do these kinds of things, that show very different perspectives, and ideally of both the positive and at least analyze and discuss the normative. So, but I'm trying not to say anything, this is right and right or better or less good, except on a positive sense, trying to say this is a better methodology, this is better data to test that hypothesis. But this is not a philosophy course, or it's not a human rights course that tries to say this is good or bad and right and wrong. We try to say, how does that perspective of Trump fit with that policy? Or how does Biden's policy from the past emerge from what? What did it come from? And Biden was particularly complicated because he was led by, he was managed, he chose people to manage and implement many different kinds of perspectives among his own staff, among his own people. So the things that might be strongly activist with one group, but in conflict with another. The black groups, for instance, may be in conflict with the immigrant Mexicans. The Mexicans may be in conflict with the feminists, the people from Oklahoma, etc. But people from Oklahoma wanted to sell gas and oil. People from Boston wanted cutting back, using less energy, etc. And so Biden tried to respond to all of these, to green windows, using the sun instead of burning anything, etc. Okay, so those are two-word versions of the Greens favor green, what do they call it? Roofs, green roofs or panels and so forth, and other kinds of things. These are simple answers, but the reason I'm making this explicit is what we have today surrounds us is all of these are going on. We can try to ignore it, and so the economic theorists will say, ceteris paribus, assume everything else equal, then these 12 variables will explain the amount of profit that a firm will have if these things hold. Now, but the point is, nobody really knows which of those coefficients are why and how strong they are, and so we're trying to say, here's a list. Here at least, even we don't try to teach statistics in this course for sure, but we're giving you the simple framework. Here we have a multi-causality. We have a dependent variable, and we may have 12 independent variables. Lots of arrows. It doesn't take any statistics to see that. And if you leave out one, then it can reverse the results. Okay. And that's a takeaway which you don't get in many courses often. And so we're trying to have you be able to take that and apply it in other courses, and most of all in life, and apply it to things, especially hot things like now, such as these Trump policies. Okay. You've heard me say that in different ways. That is, I've said it in sort of the clear, simple way right now, but to do this with specifics and to try to show how these things are in conflict is you can show with any degree of subtlety in an essay, and it's not for me. It's to be able to think about and talk about and analyze and then say what to do about this if you're working, say, as an assistant to a mayor, you're working in the White House. As I told you, I worked for a number of years with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, working with the White House policies and lobbying the White House people. And then so more. Who else has another big or small question? Can we ask?
Do you want me to sit there and move the camera for you?
Sure, that would be great. Maybe the next one.
This one?
Yeah, that would be. And pull this closer to you if you want. If you reach your slide. Tell us your name.
Charlie. I'm a senior.
What's your last name, Charlie?
Brennan.
Charlie Brandon?
Brennan.
Brennan.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a fourth-year philosophy major in the college. I think one of the aspects of the course that's been most interesting is the thought on like public aesthetics and certain ways that art is kind of injected into society as a means of policy, actually. So we watched I forget the trailer, the name of the movie, but it was like a vision of like a really strong Russia that had ideas of like the Mongol invasion. I'm forgetting the name of it. Do you?
Genghis Khan?
Yeah, it had to do with that, but it was a film that was released in Russia. We watched.
Oh, within Russia, yes.
Within Russia, yeah.
Yeah, Ivan the Terrible.
Ivan the Terrible,
Right.
yeah.
The first Tsar.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. So the idea was to, And this is the top of an iceberg of tons of stuff within Russia, and which is many people will call fake news, or it's stopping. And so the point I made was it wasn't just one, let me not answer. Why don't you elaborate in a couple of sentences of what you've seen, read, thought about, and then maybe in this course, and then ways that you may have you had anything in philosophy like aesthetics or anything like that?
I actually haven't really studied the philosophy of I haven't really studied the philosophy of aesthetics, so I couldn't really comment on that necessarily. But I had been thinking we've talked about aesthetics in a few ways in this class. Like in first week we mentioned how in Chicago the new bus stops were like from France, and it was like an objective of the mayor's office to kind of beautify these certain parts of public life. So it had me thinking about how maybe those two things connect to one another.
Absolutely. Anybody else see how that is? I mean, I didn't think about or write about this for most of my career, but it was about 15 years ago. We discovered the importance of the arts in policies that some mayors were starting to do, and so, that they were doing it, but we were having some impacts on economic growth. And there's almost nothing about this, from economists, public policy people, sociologists, so there were a few people in the arts who will say, having a Picasso would be nice, but or they may even say it'll have a big impact, but that's usually an artist, and an artist doesn't have any data or any way to have much evidence. So ideally, we're trying to give you at least the tools where we can look for and show and try to document, and that will impress skeptics. So one story on that. There was a guy he was the director of staff or something like that of the National Endowment for the Arts, NEA, in Washington. It's a small, tiny agency. If you're in Russia or China or France, the Ministry of Culture is a very important budget, policies, and so forth. In the U.S., it's tiny. So when there was a new chairman of the board who came in of the NEA, came in and said, can we do any more with this agency? And so the two of them, the chair, said, let's walk around and go to other people in Washington. So they went to the Ministry of Defense, to education, to hospitals, to public health. Said, are there things that we could have paintings in buses? Could we have bus stops in Chicago that are nicer to wait in instead of being ugly? Of not having subway trains that are dangerous as they generally are in America and ugly, whereas in France, or more so in Korea, they can be beautiful. They have concerts, they have stuff going on, they're selling things day and night. There are people who come in public transit, they go to the concerts, they have fun, they make drink, there are bars and other things nearby, they take public transit home. And after they tore down the big freeway that was right through the middle of Seoul. Okay, so these kinds of things are happening around the world, and social scientists are ignoring it for the most part. So Hegel wrote a book on aesthetics, and there's some things later. So I spent a year reading philosophy and so forth. I didn't know what to say or do myself. So in literature, in the arts, in painters, people are talking about aesthetics. Some in a serious, thoughtful, philosophical way. Others are much more casual, like Theaster Gates. He's having fun doing this stuff, but he's trying to build a thoughtful way of what he's doing. And so why care at all? Because people are responding to this now. That's the driver. This is new. And your generation, your age, a little older, a little younger, people are reacting to movies, to images, to colors, to excitement, music, beautiful people, well-dressed people, ugly people. So Musk had these things, Who's illustrated this in a public policy by that Musk himself has done? Before he was appointed by Trump. He gets dressed up. Haven't you read about this? He gets dressed up differently. Yes.
I was just asking.
I'm asking any of you to how does Musk think about and use aesthetics as public policy?
There was that time when he was trying out the Tesla Cybertruck and he was dressed in a black shirt and a bomber jacket.
Okay, there we go.
So that's like a more comfortable outfit.
Great. Okay, that's one good example. Another one, even more dramatic.
I think Teslas themselves just being like beautiful and attractive cars have shifted lots of people to owning EVs, which is something that like policymakers probably have long dreamed of.
Okay, making the cars beautiful and attractive. That's an aesthetic judgment that has a big economic impact. Okay.
I was gonna say, kind of similar to what you said, making the cars
I'm gonna
so different from all other cars on the market right now. So there's commentary on like the Cybertrucks and whether they're aesthetically attractive or ugly, and that's up to like personal I don't know, opinion or whatever. But they definitely look very distinct from cars on the market right now. And then in terms of his personal aesthetics, I don't know how much this applies to him specifically, but what you mentioned reminded me of like people talking about other CEOs in the tech world wearing like very like sleek but simple outfits when they're like talking about a new product, like the new iPhone. He was wearing like a black T-shirt and pants, you know, and so that sort of became this like classic uniform for the tech world. So to let the product do the talking more so than the.
Does Musk always wear a black shirt?
Musk, no.
No. Okay. So what else does Musk? Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I think it's also interesting just looking at like Mark Zuckerberg's like recent revamp and how he dresses, and he's trying to become like this different, like, oh, I'm cool, I'm wakeboarding and wake surfing outside, and like I'm wearing casual clothes even when I'm at press conferences, and it's like kind of changing the aesthetics of your own like personal appearance to convey like a different message and a different direction that even his company's taking, and how he's taking away all the like meta like trigger warnings or whatever it's called.
Disinformation.
Yeah, disinformation things, and how he's taken that off, and it's kind of representative of him.
Yeah, excellent examples. I saw just one other example. It's not critical, but anybody else have an example of how Musk might shock people if he wanted to go into a restaurant, which is a high-end, elegantly dressed set of people having dinner, and how might Musk do things that would shake people up?
Wear a MAGA hat.
He could have maybe, but in Houston that might not shock anybody at all. But what else?
Nazi salute?
No, he a couple of times dressed up like a bum, you know, really homeless, you know, and his face he had a little bit covered up his face, so his features weren't recognizable. Nobody saw he was Musk. They just saw he's a homeless guy coming in, you know, sitting down, and the waitresses they didn't want to serve him, and so one waitress was also saying nothing, but then another head waitress over at the other end said, "We should treat everybody equally," and I think either quietly or later on, and we should treat them like any other customer. And so she did. So she came over and said, "Can I? What would you like to have? Here's a menu, etc., etc." And then after at some point, he took off a little bit of this and said, "Oh my God, it's Musk." And so then at that point, and then the manager of the restaurant said, "Are we discriminating against some people who are dressed differently? Maybe we shouldn't be doing that. Maybe we should treat all of the all of the customers equally. Okay, so in that sense, so is Musk generally stressing equality? Not necessarily. I mean, but it's you see the mixture of multiple motives. Left, is it right? Is it center? Is it something else, or a altogether new dimension? That's one thing which we're trying to feature in this course. Anybody have an example of what I've just said? Other dimensions that don't fit the traditional things like left and right. Yes.
There was Fetterman, like Senator Fetterman, he comes into the office in like t-shirts and gym shorts. Once the Senate voted to change the dress code. So for example, I think that like sends a message that he's from Pennsylvania, so he's trying to send a message that one, he's like a healthy guy because there's that risk of stroke, and two, like he doesn't care about what other people say about him or think about his health or his being.
Good. Yes. How about combining something else? So that is the reason I chose Musk was in a sense, what he's doing is often two or three different things at once. But if you want to take Fetterman as an example of what he then might do something in addition to the clothes. I mean, several of you have made that point. What else might you do? Could you do? If you had a skit, and if you're doing this among yourselves, you go over to the Logan Center, people are doing. I mean, they're asking these kinds of questions for plays. I mean, one way, or what I'll mention one. I think I may have mentioned the term already. Who's heard of the term camp? C-A-M-P. What's that mean? It's an aesthetic term. Where'd it come from? You ought to know about it because it comes from the University of Chicago. So when he was an undergraduate here, her name was Susan Sontag, S-O-N, S-N, and maybe two N's, Sontag. She became the film critic of the New York Times for a number of years. She's very famous. She wrote also a number of novels and other things. And her most famous essay she wrote, it started here, and then I think when she was still a grad student, on something called Notes on Camp. And then there's a whole literature, if you look up, anyone look up camp in your on your computers right now. But what's it say? If none of you know anything, yes, go ahead.
Isn't it usually like flamboyant, big, like usually like there's a humorous like context to it, like something's very campy?
Yes, but flamboyant is too simple. It's more complicated than that. But anything that you see already, or you want to ask someone else?
Sure, yeah, we can just go around.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I was gonna say it's intentionally poking fun at the norms you'd expect in fashion or in aesthetics on film or something like that.
Yes, definitely, but that's still pretty general. What more specifically?
I guess it's oftentimes styles that maybe are traditionally considered ugly or something, or like absurdist. So I'm thinking what's coming to mind for me right now is like the Met Gala a few years ago. The theme was camp, and so people were showing up.
So you saw this, okay.
Yes, yeah. And so people showed up someone showed up in a fairly normal outfit, but he was holding a head that was like made to look like his head, and then there was like a big show. I think Zendaya wore like a Cinderella inspired outfit, and it had like all these lights on it in sort of a tacky but very, very like showy way. And so having this whole really, really like in your face display of a lot going on that is clashing by traditional like
Okay,
norms.
excellent, and that's terrific. Do you have something in the text there?
I think the definition,
What's it say? Yeah.
but that was like a very good description. A sensibility that revels in artifice, stylization,
Say
theatricalization,
hard fist?
artifice,
What's the word more slowly?
artifice,
Oh, artifice. Okay.
artifice,
Artifice,
stylization, theatricalization,
stylization,
stylization, theatricalization, irony, playfulness, and exaggeration rather than content.
okay. I mean, those are all, that is, she doesn't really give a sharp, clear definition in the essay at all. She has, it's all examples. Sort of like what you illustrated. But the point is the I would say the clashing of aesthetic conceptions. It's not, it's not just the black and white or the blue and the yellow, the whatever. It's doing something which is aesthetically wrong. And so by having two aesthetics, such as this is how you dress as a bum, or this is how you dress as an elegantly dressed person going out to dinner on Saturday night. So those two simple conceptions, then what you do is join them together, then you get the clash. And so in that sense, Musk was almost, when he had the rest of the meal and they realized who he was, then you could see the clashing of those. But my point is, these are not just people writing an essay in the past. You see this right now around us everywhere. You see students today dress this way. There are a lot of students on this campus who are dressing in campy stuff every day. 20 years ago, nobody did. 20, 30 years ago, how did students dress on this campus? And in many, many other colleges, let's say in the 70s and 80s, something like that, 70s and 80s especially. People just dressed in jeans, running shoes, casual shoes, a t-shirt, something like that. And it was almost a uniform. And everybody looked ugly. Deliberately. That is, extra large sizes, loose, bad colors, as if it had been thrown out by an older brother or something like that. Okay. This is, maybe you find 10% of the people dressing like that now, but you find all different kinds of styles. Okay. And then this is in dressing. How about how does this link to economic development or money? Yeah.
I think we have trends moving very quickly now with clothes, because of like social media and so all of this we're inundated with access to information about new things we should be buying or whatever to fit a certain norm, and then there's also a reaction to that where many people are pushing back against this sort of fast fashion economy, and so then they're returning to like thrifting and old trends and things, and so then you get a campus such as this one where there's a clash of all sorts of different aesthetics at once.
And if you're in the clothing store business, is it nice to have lots of quick changing fashions?
No.
Nice for whom?
It's harder for producers because they don't know what consumers want, and so they have to cycle through things quickly, which creates a lot of waste, as you're saying, a lot of fast fashion.
It's harder to do. Takes more staff, takes more money, but it also means if both for you as the producer and then you as a consumer, if you really think you have to have this new style, it costs a lot more money. At least it means more money is being spent and invested on clothes instead of wearing your mother's outfit for 20 years ago and you wear the same thing every day.
And these clothing companies are producing more vintage looking clothing because styles from the past are coming back into style. So they have to constantly change their mission every year because fashion changes, taste changes with the passing of the wind.
Good, so, excellent points. I mean, see, you're all aware of this. You can talk about it, and it's in the media all the time, especially fashion magazines or women's magazine, Elle, Donna, and so forth, the French, Italian. It's filled with this stuff, and it's in the ads, it's in their commentaries about these things. But these aren't read and thought about, or let me ask, how much of these themes that we're just discussing for 5 minutes now, things you've discussed with fellow USC students at dinner or anywhere? Never? How many of you say never? Almost never. How many would say yes, yes, now and then? Okay, so that's good. So anybody else want to add something to the discussion? Tell us your name a little bit.
I'm Michelle.
Last name?
Jin, J-I-N.
Okay, Michelle. And are you from Korea?
No,
Or-
Chinese.
Chinese. Okay.
Yeah.
So anything? Can you? But go ahead.
I didn't really have any specific thoughts. I was just wondering if there was like any advice or tips we should keep in mind for the midterm or anything like that.
Be able to answer the kinds of questions we're discussing right now.
Okay.
Just kind of expanding off of that question, how many ID terms are we expected to be looking at? I think like globalization is definitely one, extent of the market could be one, culture could be one, aesthetics could be one. In terms of other ideas,
Look at the syllabus. Key words, key concepts in the syllabus, and the big, look for the big simple things that are on the syllabus, in the readings, I've talked about, we've discussed, and we're discussing right now. All these things are useful. But if you want to shift away from aesthetics, but it's great to bring that in. Thank you. Yes, Lucas?
Are you okay with us drawing from our own personal experience when we're writing too, or do you want us to just like stick to the literature and like what we've read?
Either way, I'd say that for sure. I mean, it's good to mention one or two big concepts, Smith or the whatever, and then how this doesn't fit, or where and why it shifts when you change these assumptions or whatever, something like that. But then you can have either examples that you've seen in the street or from any other source, and by no means you don't need just to say it has to be an example from the course readings. So I would say yes, that is. It's good that you show how you can take something from the course and take it to a different context, a different situation, and use those ideas yourself. That's what we hope you can comfortably do, and then see where and why, how you can playfully, how would you bring in something like the concept? And if you're invited to go to the Met Gala and wear an outfit that's campy, how to decide what to do. Hand up, yeah.
I was wondering if we have time to cover this in our discussion today, if we could talk about or review
I just missed your word.
Sorry,
So time to what?
If we had time to review this sort of progression from like feudal society in our readings to like modernization and post-modernization, I know that we had a few increments that we've talked about in classes before, so if we could like just sort of string them together and how that progression happens, and that could be discussion based or lecture, whatever.
Okay, now my presentation was drawn directly, and you get the detail. It's the first item in that section on the whatever it's called, the social movement section. It's a section right after markets. And you see it there?
On the syllabus right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't looked at that, I mean, if you ask the question and you don't know that reading, that the whole thing is exactly what I said.
Okay.
But I'll mention one or two ideas. That is, we start with the feudal. I mentioned, for example, and I said, what's the feudal distinction that's critical in America today in voting? And I remember my example. Blacks versus whites. That comes from feudal slavery. Okay. And then if we flash forward, we can go through unions, through civic groups, were environmental organizations like the Sierra Club, where people had membership cards, and the average member, we found also, the average Sierra Club member was a member of 7 environmental organizations. They paid money to them, they contributed, etc. They were active on many things like that. When we get to, and it's called an environmental, I choose because it wasn't embraced by the Democrats or the Republicans. It was not a party issue, it was a new issue. It was called and it generated a new social movement, an NSM, which was fighting and disagreeing with the traditional parties and the traditional unions and the traditional media, which ignored these things. So then after this, and so when were these invented, basically, and this term was the new social movements, roughly, chronologically, and why? It came after, yes?
I'm sorry, I was gonna say like late 60s, early 70s. It was Nixon who created the
Exactly.
EPA.
Exactly. And and it just EPA, if someone to explain something, yeah, do you know the woman from China, you know what the EPA means? Probably not. Miss Jin?
Sorry,
What's the EPA?
I'm not sure.
So you need it, so why don't you explain it, what the EPA is?
It's the Environmental Protection Agency, which I guess deals with several regulations about the environment and what a certain company can do or not do. But my knowledge is pretty limited, so I would open it up to.
No, but that's great. That is, it's a federal agency requiring to cut back on smoke, to cut back on air pollution, to cut back on dirt, dust, etc. And it was very, very conflictual when it was first invented. Who was president at the time, ironically?
Nixon.
There we go. Okay. And there was a Democratic majority Congress who wanted to do this, but Nixon came along and signed it, and they went ahead with it. Okay, so so the politics of this today is ironic and interesting because Biden has been very environmentalist and Trump on many issues is not. It's the opposite. Whereas the Chinese have done the opposite of the Americans. So the Chinese earlier, 10 years ago, I talk to people who go to China and say, you're in an elevator in Beijing, you go up an elevator and the air is green because it's so dirty. Today, at least the national policies in China are much more environmentally active and favoring these around the world in ways that Trump is withdrawing from the Paris Accords where they try to be more environmentally concerned. Okay, so that go ahead.
Just about pulling out of the Paris Agreement, do you think that that's something where the Democratic and Republican parties in the U.S. are going to sort of volley back and forth on that? And because I know, he pulled out the first time he was president, and then we reinstated our standing in that agreement. So I don't know. I'm skeptical sometimes about the extent to which global governance has teeth. If we can just pull out and go back and forth like this. So I don't know if you have anything to say on that.
Okay, I would say not trying to give you an answer. The answer is what I'm trying to encourage myself and to you with that kind of thing is to say, how can we analyze the question in ways that we have some of the tools that we've tried to bring to that kind of question in the course. And so one is to look at, say, the context and then the relationships among the variables. So your question might be, are the parties, like the Democratic and Republican Party, consistently favoring or opposing the environmental issues? The answer in which we're stressing in the course is there are a lot of that environment. I'm using the environmental issue because there are a ton of other issues as well, like campiness or all kinds of other things. And we're trying to give you some concepts. So Robert Dahl, what's the one big concept from Robert Dahl that's a useful major book that is useful here? Issue specificity. Resources. Did he talk about power? You know, the people have the power, you know, they do that. No, he said that's stupidly simple. He said we have resources. We may have 15 kinds of resources: money, personal contacts, union relations, votes. These kinds of resources may be activated and organized and put together with each other and have an impact, or they may not. And that's the difference between the so-called term power or leadership or decisions is that these depend. That depend in the sense of, I mentioned just briefly, the community power field brought into the whole analysis of social science and of journalism and so forth. Of how do you analyze power? And so we can go through concepts like resources, like issue specificity, like mobilization. These kinds of things can make a huge difference in answering the kind of question which you asked. Trump illustrated this when he first ran for president in writing these little comments. One sentence saying this, another sentence which would normally be considered a contradiction with a second sentence. So lots of people said, you know, what kind of garbage is this? He's not saying anything consistent. It doesn't fit with the normal way of doing this. But he was doing it to shock people. And enough other people somehow paid attention, even if in part it was, he was clearly deliberately shocking. His first statement, Mexicans are rapists. That was that, no politician should use that kind of language. He used those kinds of words right at the beginning, and it got him a whole lot of attention. So he's regularly says, we're going to do it a different way. We're going to break the rules. And even if a lot of it may end up being wrong or silly or whatever, but at least, okay, I'm not defending it all. I'm trying to say and most of all, he didn't invent any of this stuff. There were and are others that are going further, such as in Iceland, in the area called Iceland has had a national government, and then the mayor of the largest city was 20, 30 years ago. He was doing stuff like this. So there are political leaders who've been doing this, or Macron was the head of France, and he combined some unusual things. The woman who's in Italy right now. She's managed to have enough of a distinctive, successful combination of things that she's got a strong support within Italy, whereas Germany, France, and England are all divided domestically, politically. They don't have a majority for anything, and Italy is now emerging as a major international force in the Ukraine relating to Russia. How about that? Based on style. The Italians have been more sensitive to style than many others, and she's paying attention. Okay. Other questions? Other things altogether? So let me just wrap up the point. Your question was, how can we link things that progress, if we use, maybe shouldn't use that term, how do they change from the feudal era to unions, to industry, to socialism, and in the Marxist version, socialism to communism? Where and how do these things vary, not just in those terms, but also, we talked about the campiness. And so we got to that when we get to the Sierra Club. Sierra Club was still the new social movement. Okay, the new social movement was then superseded by what? What's happened since the 1970s?
Well, there was the Reagan conservative movement of the 80s.
Did Reagan, in that sense, illustrate a change in what were the important political and organizational actors that?
It wasn't just him. There was a lot of, in the 70s, I think there was the equal rights movement, which really lost traction during Reagan's time. There's like Jerry Falwell, Phyllis Schlafly, and lots of major figures who talked about like the rise of this new conservatism. And a lot of that was in response to the late 60s counterculture movements. I don't know if that's what you're looking for.
Okay, well, no, these are all good. That is, I mean, none of this is right or wrong. But what I'm trying to help you do is articulate. Say, let's just maybe take a few more minutes. Take any one of these, like especially Reagan. Any ways that Reagan was not simply a quote traditional Republican.
He was big on union busting, which I think was universally regarded as not that bad before Reagan, but then suddenly became very bad during his time.
Okay.
He made a big, I think he talked a lot about abortion. He made that a big issue of his party platform. I think obviously with Roe v. Wade happening 8 years before he was elected, that's a factor.
Okay, excellent points all, excellent points. Because in general, compared to Trump, Reagan was generally seen as classic Republican. And much of what he did was classic traditional American right.
I think he was establishing classic, what it meant to be a new Republican, post-Nixon. What did it really mean to be conservative?
Okay. And it's great to be, I mean, I wouldn't say great, why is it great? It's good to be more, and you will be and should be more analytically sensitive, because both within the Republican Party and within the Democratic parties nationally and state and locally and among citizens on this campus, people are all arguing, what's it mean to be conservative? What's it mean to be traditional? What's it mean to be progressive or progressive Democrat or this and that? And these kinds of debates are going on. I'm not saying anything is good or bad, of course, but I'm saying these are different kinds of discussions than we would have had on this campus or in many of the social media. And so the social media have enhanced and made this kind of thing possible and easier, because a tiny minority can have their own social media and then talk about these things and then they got all kinds of things like this got represented in the Biden national government, for example. So that was good. Moving up to Reagan, moving up to the new social movements. What came after the new social movements? A new term I said it's an awkward, I guess, yes.
Wasn't it like the new social movement?
Exactly. What's the, I said I was unhappy because I hadn't come up with something more creative, but what's new?
Well, it began in the mid-2000s with Occupy Wall Street. So
About what?
Occupy Wall Street.
What was by Wall Street?
Occupy Wall Street.
Occupy
That
Wall
was
Street.
one of the
Okay,
new
yes.
social movements. So they were very people power based. There's
Yes.
no central organization.
Here
It's
we
just
go.
run collectively by the people.
Okay, there we go. Very big, concisely, powerfully stated. Right on target. No board, no membership, no cards, no fees that you join. No one who is saying, we're now going to occupy Wall Street. Instead, people just showed up. They came with a tent, sleeping bags or whatever. Others left if they didn't like it. They took off. People come in, left at their own point, whenever they chose, right outdoors, outside this building, we had something of the same thing. That is, there was clearly, we had if you will, Zionist or Palestinian groups that were being discussed, and there's a war going on in the Middle East. But what was happening and what that meant here on this campus was unclear. And so you could get one person who would say something, but media had a very hard time, and the same thing across the U.S. Just one little footnote which I found about this. How did all those tents get bought and erected and given to all these campuses all across the U.S. at the same time? Anybody know that? Or who paid for it?
There were outside groups, lots of them, both on both sides, ironically, like those who were supposedly like pro-Israel and others who were pro-Palestine, that funded lots of these protests throughout. And they're all very interconnected. Lots of students worked from around each other with like different campuses, but there's also a lot of like outside forces that there was a sense of students kind of being manipulated into doing things that maybe they didn't fully understand.
Generally, maybe so, but was there a particular outside force that someone came up with and found some numbers and wrote, and paid for those tents? I ask because it was so ironic. It's a woman who was a descendant of the Levi-Strauss family from San Francisco that sold the famous jeans. Jewish. Funding both the Palestinian tents and the Jewish tents. Anybody who wanted a tent, get out. Okay. So what was her political ideology? I have no idea. But the press simply said it's ironic that it came from, and related, there was another member, directly, indirectly, whatever, by marriage, I think, of the Levi-Strauss family who's just been elected mayor of San Francisco. So, just thinking of these, in this sense, they're illustrations of the complications of framing what's the left, what's the right, what's the Democrats, what are the Palestinians, what do the Jews, the Arab. I mean, those labels are too simple. Okay. Any other theme that we haven't talked about? So sorry, just one more step I've left out. We start with a feudalism, we go through industrial, we go up to the new social movements, we go to the new social movements. After that are we also discussing a little bit in the course, which we've covered, and we'll cover more as we continue. Anybody? The scene. So Occupy Wall Street was both a new social movement and a scene. That is, and it's similar. There's no organization. There's no structure. A scene is what, people are there. They're taking. I use the example. People are taking pictures of each other. They're wearing outfits that may be campy or something else. They're having fun. Some of them were. And I give you the example that USC students who want to see a clear environmentalist program or an anti-Wall Street, anti-capitalist program, who wanted that kind of ideological, tight, coherent ideology, they didn't find it, or they found 20 different versions of that. Said, what kind of stuff? This is no real movement. It's people just, it's a mess. So you have these new negative terms. A mess, disorganized, inconsistent. There's no theory. I mean, you read about all this stuff today. So is the answer we're to throw up our hands and say the world is totally out of control? We're trying to give you some beginnings of answers in this course. With that, and one way, what was one way of answering it that I suggested when we could rotate 90 degrees, and remember what that was? What do we know? I said, how would we turn 90 degrees? It's a simple idea, but you could catch it that way. 90 degrees could be sort of an Excel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and A, B, C, D, E. So if you have a matrix, and what I gave you in the paper is feudal up through the scenes. We have, say, 15 of these categories, and that is we presented at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 15. So we take those and we move them over onto the top. So instead of saying this is happening chronologically the way Marx talked about it, we could say these are all around us right now. In one Occupy movement, in this classroom, in this room, in the tents right out there, we may find some people who are fighting about slavery and racism, black power, feminism. Others will be talking about aesthetics of campiness. And you can be doing any combination of those, of different people. That's why life that is. So I'm not telling you anything new, but don't just throw it out. Yes, go ahead.
Is that how we get sort of more discourse nowadays around intersectionality across issues?
Absolutely. This is in a sense, an intersectionality. What's your normal thought of definition of intersectionality?
When sort of different aspects of one's identity or social groupings are overlapping. So, for instance, Black women have a particular perspective on Blackness and feminism, and the way that those identities impact them.
So yes indeed, but the example is perfect. But the term intersectionality is a more general concept. We can say that if you have A and B together, if you have black and women, these are two different kinds of minorities. And so intersectionality says you're both black and a woman, therefore the intersectionality is the heightened impact of having both being a black and a woman instead of being a white woman or a black man. So the intersectionality is that. And so the point is, there are now methods and data and people who are analyzing and measuring the impact on the degree of intersectionality. But that's a clear, simple version. But my point is, we're having 25 things at once. And so I'm saying, maybe not, yes, in fact we can have 25 things, but I'm saying one way to analyze it is to say, let's put them not, instead of, I gave you the quote from Faulkner that said, history is not past. Okay, for sure. So history can tell us what people are doing, not just in their clothes, but in their ideologies and how they think and what they consider is an insult or something else, or gets people elected or not. That's the idea. Who else has any kind of a question? I'm giving you answers and material, some of which is clear and simple, and others of which are complicated and subtle. So I would say if you at least tell us, show us in your exam that you can at least give us some of the clear and simple, and if you can begin to elaborate some of the more subtle, that's great. But don't get overwhelmed with the subtleties which we talk about, because these are cutting edge kinds of things for life, and so because of that we have so few people writing about this in a normal, quote, systematic social science way. What's a clear, simple example? Say what's the definition of human rights, and what was fought over between, let's say, between the Chinese and the Western definition of human rights around 1945 to 1945 up through for a couple of decades. Why did the Chinese, that is, many of the Western press, political leaders would attack the Chinese and say, you shouldn't be doing that because you're ignoring human rights of certain kinds of people, and what did the that is, you weren't letting newspapers say anything they want. You're controlling and closing down newspapers or people like that, or social media. So they then stopped, or they cut back, or they had tariffs or laws. What did the Chinese say in turn of what's wrong with that statement? You people in the West, you're just talking about rich people. You're ignoring the poor people. And the most important human right which you're ignoring is poverty. And we should most be concerned on improving the economic development of poor people in the majority of the world, including China. And we are doing that efficiently and better than you're doing in the West. They grew the economy much faster than the people did in the West from the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And the Chinese economy grew fantastically. And people who are really poor in China have gotten much more successful economically, and that in turn has led to things like talking about aesthetics, style, clothes, cars. I mean, the huge market for Teslas and cars is in France or the U.S. No, it's in China. I mean, China. I mean, cars used to be an elite symbol. You know, tons of those cars are now. So, I'm giving you in a sense the ancient history of human rights, as you, some of you with human rights concerns. It's good to be able to trace back historically just a little bit and say, and apply this to human rights, and say, is human rights intersectionality? Well, yes, but it's also just being richer or poorer. And that's what the Chinese usefully articulated is. Okay. Who else hasn't spoken? You've all spoken. Who here? You've all had good points. One more good point. This man in the white shirt. Tell us a little bit about your background and interests.
I didn't speak earlier, but I am an economics student. So I did think it was interesting when she initially brought up like the extent of the market concept. Especially just looking at like in your economics classes, you'll learn like explicitly how tariffs work and things like that, but you don't like really understand like the extent of what that effect has and like how that causes this division of labor and people specializing and how like in a smaller economy it's like everyone's got to do everything, but in a larger economy that people can, there is this process of division of labor and people can specialize, and it creates a more vibrant economy, and you don't really get that aspect of that in like a more technical macro class or something like that.
So what you're not quite saying explicitly, but what I'm trying to do in commenting and agreeing with you is saying, I'm not disagreeing with any of that at all, but I'm talking about simple and complicated and subtle, for instance. It's saying economists are doing all of these too, but the economists have gotten more and more subtle and faster and earlier than the other social scientists, including especially sociologists and political scientists and anthropologists, in talking about the concept of amenity. What's an amenity?
Amenity is like anything that could provide kind of like a cultural element or something like that. Like church could be seen as an amenity, like a movie theater, anything like that.
But how does a movie theater work as an amenity?
Well, it could be seen as like a place where people can gather and like view a film or something that could improve upon like their cultural experience, and it's something that's not just what makes a city run. Like it's something that adds like a cultural dimension to a place.
Okay, so playing as two kinds of economists, that a movie theater can be a public good, as Paul Samuelson and others talked about it. If you walk by in a street, you see, say, 10 movie theaters, and you've got 10 different movies that 10 different movies you could go to, and that gives you more cultural diversity as amenities. But if you go into one movie theater, how do you get in? You pay. In that sense, it's a market transaction. And a market transaction is not an amenity. The definition of an amenity is a non-market good or service. Non-market good or service. So he said, in that sense, be careful of using the example of movie theaters or restaurant. I mean, a restaurant, you can have 25 restaurants, fast food, elegant, and so forth, all there. These are amenities if you're enjoying them outside, or if you walk through, or you go through and but you don't pay anything. But if you actually so amenity can that is, a restaurant can be, and a movie theater, things which can be both, but their dynamics may be different in the way that their causal dynamics operate. In the sense that if you got more money, you can afford to go to some things where you have more amenities. That is, if you go to the Met Gala, you're probably a multimillionaire. Okay, the Met. What's the Met for people from China?
The Metropolitan Museum of Art.
This is the New York City Elegant Museum of Art. Okay, Metropolitan Museum. So maybe you may not have caught that what Met means. Okay, so these are very affluent people, so they can dress up with Christmas tree lights on their clothes and so forth, and enjoy that, and then watch and see this kind of. Okay, so the point is, amenities may be in part costless, but they may also assume, or in that sense, the Chinese earlier point, you got to have a lot of money to do some of these kinds of things. And I'm now working with a lot of people in China, because right now in the last 10 years, China's getting very affluent. And so China is doing a lot of these amenities. They're doing all these kinds of lifestyle things. Many for the first time, or at least in numbers, not just in the West, but Chinese within China are rebuilding cities. They're building new cities. They're building beautiful trains, and they're tearing down old neighborhoods. They're building new neighborhoods that are being more attractive. And so within China, these are why people are really talking about these scenes very actively, and it's part of national planning and national policy. Even though that is, our scene stuff was added when economic growth was dropped in the 5-year plan. So it's a revolution to drop the economic growth from the 5-year plan. Okay, we're at the end, and we'll have the exam Wednesday, and we'll continue on Monday thereafter. Cheers. I'm sure you'll all do well. Your questions and your answers are great. You can all get A's. Everybody can get A's if you do it. Oh, good A's.
Thank you.